Welcome back to Station House Cookery School in beautiful Dumfries and Galloway in southwest Scotland. Today we're going to be looking at hot water crust pastry. This is a really versatile pastry. It's fantastic for doing pork pies and game pies, pâté en croûte. The world's your oyster once you've got the hang of it. The good thing also is that it's a relatively easy pastry to make. At the cookery school, this is what we usually start off with, because you don't have to worry about hot hands or too many techniques. So it's a really good one to start with if you've never done pastry before. The ingredients that we need are 150 grams of strong white flour, 150 grams of plain flour, 100 mils of water, 100 grams of lard, a good pinch of salt for seasoning, and a free-range whole egg for brushing your pies when they're ready to go in the oven. That's all we need to get going. So here we go. I'm very simply going to take my water and pour that into the saucepan. We have our lard melted into the butter, sitting nicely here. So now we're going to take our 2 types of flour and we're going to sift them together. A couple of really good pinches of salt. If you don't put the salt in, it really will affect the flavor of your pastry. You don't want to miss out the salt. And now we're going to just add in our water and lard mixture. Please remember it's hot. As soon as this goes in, we're going to start mixing it. Don't do it with your hands. Take a wooden spoon or a spatula, otherwise you will burn yourselves. Okay, so our mixture goes in like that, and with our spatula, just bring it together, and you can see here, it's not a difficult pastry to make, and it's actually a very old traditional one. This method was one of the first, historically, hundreds of years ago, that we used to use. In medieval Britain, a pastry would be made predominantly without the fat to begin with, hundreds of years ago. And it was just a flour and hot water mix. And that would encase whatever it is that you're cooking, chicken, vegetables, whatever it might be. And it would create what was called a coffin. And that coffin would create essentially an oven within an oven. And when your food was cooked, you broke away the pastry and threw it away. You didn't eat it. And it was only once we started to add fat into the pastry that it started to taste nicer and we actually started to eat the pastry. So now it's cooled, we can get our hands in, and I'm just bringing together the pastry, and I can just start to gently knead it together so everything is nicely incorporated. Get any of those little bits up off your workbench. And it really is bomb-proof, as I said. You can't really overwork it, there's no need to, and you're not going to make it tough. And as long as you're nice and incorporated, there we go. And you can see that is our nice warm hot water crust pastry, and that's ready to use straight away. Or you can just wrap it up in a little bit of cling film and then it'll sit quite happily until you're ready to use it. If you put it in the fridge, it will firm up and it'll need a little bit of manipulation once you come to make your pie, but that's no problem whatsoever. It just needs a little bit of warmth for it to become nice and malleable again, like it is right now. Now we're ready to make our pies. The quantities I've given you there will give you just under 500 grams of pastry. There'll be a little bit of evaporation and loss there, so it'll be just under 500. You want to weigh it out so you know exactly how much you've got, and then have a look at the type of tins you'll be using. Now, I'm using these, which are 12 centimeters by 4 centimeters high there. The pastry that I've given you will do 2 of those. So have a bit of a look at your own tins and work out how much you need. And what I've done, I've taken that 250 grams, I've weighed it again and turned it into 2/3 and 1/3. The 2/3 is going to do for the main part of the pie, and the 1/3 will do for the top part. What we're going to do now is roll out the bottom part so that we can line the base of the tin. If you're looking for a circle, before you roll, simply form it a little bit with your hands like that into a circle shape. Whatever shape you start with is the shape that you'll end up with when you're rolling. So if you can get it into a bit of a circle to begin with, you've got a better chance of ending up with a circle. No need really for any flour here, as long as you've got a bit of a lightness of touch. And here's my wooden rolling pin, and very gently, I'm just going to start rolling and do a 90-degree turn after each roll, just to make sure it's not sticking. And can you see how robust and forgiving this pastry is? That's why if you're new to pastry making, this is the one to go for. It's a very, very good-humoured, forgiving type of pastry. And now, pick it up around the edges and allow the center of the pastry to drop into your tin first, like so. And then use your fingers to just mold and flatten around the walls of the tin. Do make sure you're getting into the base of the tin where the wall joins the floor. That part there is where you can easily end up with it far too thick, and so when it's cooking, that part doesn't cook as well as the walls. So take a little bit of time here. The other thing you can do, don't be afraid if you're a little bit short on one side and you've got a little bit too much on the other. Just take a knife, you can trim off one part from one side and do a bit of patchwork on the other. Nobody will ever know. Just make sure that you've got enough pastry just to come up and slightly over the rim of your tin, because that's where we're going to be joining the top part. Now, we're going to have a little bit of a look at our lid now. So the same procedure. I've got my 1/3 there. Just going to turn it into a bit of a circle. And roll it out to about the same thickness, just under a pound coin. We're going to be using the second tin as the template for the lid. And again, don't worry if it's a little bit larger than the lid, because we're going to be trimming off, because we want a few little bits to make our nice patterns to put on the top. So just take a nice sharp knife, trim round, and we can lift that off, and there's our lid. These pieces here, don't throw them away. They're going to be re-rolled and they're going to make into our little leaf shapes and whatever we want to put onto the top. Again, if they dry out a little bit, just give them a bit of a mold when you're ready. And that is our lid ready to go onto our filled pie. For the filling, today I'm going to be using a beautiful sausage meat that we've got from our local butchers. They do a Cumberland sausage which comes pre-seasoned. It's absolutely delicious. And so I'm going to be using that. It doesn't need anything else doing to it. If you do buy a simple sausage meat, check for your seasoning, because once it's in the pie, there's nothing you can do about it. So if you're using basic sausage meat, season it up, whatever herbs, spices you might want to put in there. Fry off a little bit, check for your seasoning before you put the raw meat into the pie. But because I know this comes pre-seasoned from my butcher, very happy to put it straight in. And what I've got here is 250 grams of the sausage meat, which is just very simply going to go straight into my pie. Give it a bit of a press down there. Oh, absolutely lovely. You don't want to press too firmly, because remember, as it cooks, that's going to shrink, and that little bit of shrinkage is where our jelly is going to go once we've let it cool. So just press it down there into your pie tin. Now, once we've got that in there, the next thing we do is just take our lid, pop it onto the top, and this is where we can do a little bit of crimping to start off. And you just take your middle finger and your thumb, put them together, and your index finger goes in the middle, and you just draw them together as you go around. It'll probably be a little bit uneven to start with, but this is just our first crimp. Then I'm going to trim a little bit off and then go around again, and you'll see how nicely it all evens up. Okay. So now you can see where there's a little bit too much. We're just going to trim that away. Don't throw that away, because that can be used for your decoration on the top. There we go. So wherever there's just a little bit too much, trim that. First pie finished. Now, very, very importantly here, right in the center of the pie, I'm going to make a hole, and you want to make it a decent hole, because it's got to be large enough so that when it's cooked and cooled, we're able to pour our jelly into that. So do make sure that you've got a decent sized vent in the top there. Just to decorate our pies a little bit, here's a little bit of the offcuts from the pastry that we've got. If they've hardened up a little bit, or they've gone a bit cool, simply give them a bit of a squeeze in your hands like that, and you'll find that they come back to life and they become nice and elastic and easy to work with really, really quickly. So to make a little bit of decoration, I like to do leaves, but obviously you can do whatever you want. I'm just gonna roll that out again into a bit of a circle, and then using my rolling pin, just roll it out as flat as you can, because this is very much just for decoration. So there's our pastry, really nicely thinly rolled out, and now we can just take our knife and cut little leaf shapes. Very carefully, just use your knife, lift the leaves up and arrange them on the top of your pies in threes. There we go. Finished. And ready for egg washing. One free range egg. We're really lucky to have a farm just down the road, Upper Seneca, that does the most amazing free range eggs. And this is going to bring the color to your pie crust. And you don't want to skip this stage. If you skip this stage, you will end up with a very, very pale, insipid looking crust, which you don't want. You want it to look nice and appealing. So we're going to take one egg. And give it a bit of a whisk. And very simply, I'm going to paint the egg wash onto the pie. And you want to make sure that you get into every single little nook and cranny around your pie, because you want it all to have a lovely golden crust. Don't forget the outside part as well there, but do be careful not to get too much egg in between your pie crust and the tin, because what will happen there is it will cook and it can burn on the outside, and then you have a slightly black part on your pie, which you don't want when it's cooked. There's one. And two. So I'm just going to wait for a few minutes so that I can take them out of the tins. Now that we've got our pies out of the oven, we're ready to release them. They've been cooling just for about 5 minutes. And what I'm going to do is just release the outside of the pie, give it a little bit of a wiggle, and we should be able to just lift them out if we're lucky. So let's have a go. Release the spring form there. And then take a knife and just check around the outside. It's all looking good. And so now, this is why they need to be a little bit cool as well. Just lift them out. There's one. And we'll do the other. Just release. There we go. Looking good. And lift out there. And there are our beautiful pork pies. Our pies are now out of the oven, looking absolutely beautiful. What I've got to do now is let them cool down completely. As they're cooling, the meat on the inside is going to shrink a little bit. It shrinks away from the sides of the pie, and that's how we're going to be able to get the jelly in there. We've got our holes in the top, if you remember, that we put in. So as soon as they've completely cooled, we're going to be able to pour our jelly into there, which will be hot. Then as we let that cool down, it'll set, then they're going to be ready to eat. So got to wait a couple of hours now until they're completely cool. So we're a few hours later. Our pies have cooled down completely to room temperature. They're looking absolutely beautiful. So I'm just going to finish off by making the jelly that we're going to pour into the middle. And I'm going to do that by using some leaf gelatin and also some stock. Now, get to know your own gelatin. The leaf gelatin that I use, 2 leaves will set 200 mils really firmly. So about 200 milliliters of stock, 2 of these leaves will set it absolutely beautifully. And what I need to do is essentially first soak these in just a little bit of cold water until they go really spongy. And then we're going to add those to the warm stock, dissolve it, and then we're going to pour that into the pies. So here we go. First, I'm just going to soak these in a little bit of cold water, just for 4 or 5 minutes max. We can pick it up and it's really nice and soft and spongy and gelatinous, which is just what we want. That's how you know when it's ready to use. And we're just going to squeeze out any excess water that we've got. And we're going to pop that into our jug. And we have our 200 mils of warmed through pork stock here. 200 mils should be more than enough for these pies, but you never know exactly how much that meat has retracted and on the inside, so you don't know how much stock you're going to need. Pour this warm stock over the gelatin. You don't want to have your stock too hot, and certainly don't ever put gelatin into boiling liquid, because that's really going to affect the set. We don't want that. And make sure you get to know your gelatin to decide how firm a set you like. For a pie, I like quite a firm set. And now we're going to try and put it into our pies. So now we have our pork pies filled with a beautiful jelly. They're starting to cool, and all I've got to do now is resist cutting into them for another 2 or 3 hours until that jelly is completely set and they're ready to slice into. So there you have it, beautiful hot water crust pork pie. Really hope you give it a go at home. Let me know how you get on, and we'll see you back at Station House very soon. Bye bye now.